Testing, testing. One, two, three.
Perfect, perfect.
Speaking to Neal here.
Yeah, Ezekiel, right?
Yep,
How are you feeling?
I'm good, man. It's 7:30 over here. So, where
We're-
you from?
I'm
East
in,
Coast, right?
yeah, East Coast. I'm in Jersey.
Jersey. Okay.
Here in Cali, or are you?
Yeah, yeah. Have you been?
Yeah, a bunch actually. I think I'm going to be there a lot this year too, actually, for some like meditation conferences and things like that.
Okay. Like what kind of meditation conferences do they have here? Like, or like where
So,
at?
yes, so I grew up on Paramahansa Yogananda's path called Self-Realization Fellowship since I was 5 years old, and what he teaches is ancient and scientific yogic techniques of meditation. So he came to the U.S. in 1920 to basically spread meditation in the West, and his centers are all over California, primarily the greater LA area and also Encinitas. And there's a beautiful it's this place called Lake Shrine in it's like sort of by Malibu a little bit. It's just like a beautiful, peaceful meditation lake, and it's like a grounds that you can walk around like out in nature and the craziness of nearby LA.
Yeah. So you're a big fan of retreat, right? Like you like going, taking time away from the world and stuff, the busyness of it, and then you go and meditate or do silent retreats and things like that.
Spot on, spot on. I did a 7-day darkness retreat in at the end of the year last year. So I went into complete darkness for 132 hours, and it was one of the most beautiful experiences I've ever had.
Yeah, and like what happened in those 7 days? Like
It
that
was
sounds pretty crazy. I've
yeah,
done float tanks, so I've gotten a taste of what that is, but I imagine 7 days.
it's very different. It's very different. So you have 3 days before, so you get to the retreat center. It's on this beautiful ancient Mayan volcanic lake, and from an eruption about 85,000 years ago. Beautiful, beautiful nature location. And so you get there, you integrate for about 3 days, you prepare yourself, meditate, just like go into silence basically. And then you go into the darkness. And in the darkness, there's literally nothing to do but be with your own thoughts, be with your mind, meditate, do a spiritual or yoga practice. So I managed to keep a little bit of a routine for myself just to just stay grounded as it relates to like morning stretching and yoga, and then maybe some workout. So like I did like push-ups and squats and lunges just to like get the blood flowing, because the shower was also a cold shower. And so that also helped to take a cold shower once I was hot. But it was genuinely hours and hours a day meditating. And I became this like open channel basically of just guidance and insight, and each day had a different theme. So one day was around healing the death of my mom, another day was around guidance in sort of business and life, another day was around healing relationships and sort of taking the blame in relationships and past partnerships that I've had. And it's not really about the other person, they're just the teacher, they're the mirror. It's actually all about the self. And so I came to a lot of interesting realizations in relationships, and cutting energetic cords after allowing them to heal. And one of the days was just like towards the end, it was a profound, basically like a DMT experience, because what happens in complete darkness is your body releases endogenous DMT. So DMT is the same psychoactive compound in ayahuasca. It's also believed that when you're born and when you die, DMT is released in the body. And so um, it was like full eyes open, looking around the room, vision of being transported into a cave in the Himalayas with like a voice speaking to me. It was like the experience was like wild on so many levels. And then, yeah, yeah.
Okay, before we go into that though, I kind of want to, I want to maybe get into your mind a little bit around the idea of darkness, right? Because for the average person, especially, I mean, I'm from California, LA. The idea of going to darkness, and I even like question friends on this too, like, hey, you want to go to a float tank? All you do is spend 2 hours in pitch black darkness. Their friend, they panic and they're like, no, like that's crazy. Like, why would you do that? So, but for me, like I did it. And I think the reason why I did it was I was drawn towards removing identities, removing, or letting go of different thoughts and kind of settling into this unknown space and being comfortable in there. Like for me, that was like the purpose of it. But for you, like what does the darkness mean? Like, and why'd you seek to go into the darkness in the first place?
Ezekiel, you and I were not that different. my intention was literally to completely let go. That was my intention, to let go of the egoic story of who I believe Neal is, who I think Neal is, the stories he's told himself, the places he's worked, the roles he thinks of himself as a son, a brother, even like an angel medium, a consciousness researcher, a meditator. Let go of all of it. And how do I, because I truly believe life is a journey of just letting go of the self over and over and over again. And there's infinite layers that it really goes through. And one of the really profound experiences I came through in it was water doesn't know itself to be wet when it's in the ocean. It needs to be taken out in a bucket and poured on dry land on a beach to see, okay, this is wet. This is the duality of wet and dry. And similarly, light doesn't know itself to be light. It needs to go into darkness to see that it is light, to understand the duality that it is. And so, but the thing is, light doesn't even begin to comprehend what we actually are. Light is a construct of human words, which is very limited in its ability to express what it actually is. It's something that really needs to be fully experienced and felt in order to then be integrated. And that was one of the deepest things that I really came out feeling. And St. Francis of Assisi has an awesome quote that is, the one who is looking is what is looking. And so it's this concept of we're always looking, especially people in the spiritual world or meditation world. Well, what are we looking for? And so it's hard in our own egoic sense of self and having a mind that is constantly thinking to take a pause and create that break in consciousness to see that what is looking is actually what is it is looking for. And so it was really like a firsthand felt experience of that for the first time in my life.
Yeah, I've heard that quote before. Actually, I love that quote. But so yeah, I'd imagine like just like in pure darkness, yeah, seeing that contrast, you can actually experience like, you're awake, you're alert, you're sentient, and then having that contrast of darkness, you can kind of finally probably get an image of yourself, or maybe see the light of your own consciousness in that setting.
100%.
That's the whole goal of it.
Yeah.
So like when you were in the darkness, though, I'm assuming your ego was like throwing different things at you. I mean, that definitely happens when you are just sitting there with yourself, with your thoughts. So, I mean, what are some things that were challenging, or what are some things that your ego threw at you?
Yeah, it's so interesting because when you're alone in the darkness, there's nothing to do. You can't see. I was feeling around the room for where I was walking. I had carpets on the ground to kind of make sure like I was, okay, this is the end of this carpet. So that means the yoga mat's over here, the bed's over here. I'm not going to walk into this wall in front of me. And like your mind is just coming up with everything. Like, and that's why each day kind of had a different theme for me, because it was like pulling up all of the dark crap in my shadow closet that maybe I hadn't looked at. So the stuff around my mom's passing and the grief I never actually got to fully feel and go through because of whatever, my need to feel stoic or to show up for my family or in a certain way, or not really having the time or space to go through where did I go wrong in my relationships and how did I err, instead of looking at the other person and blaming them. And what's the most important part of it is the integration part of it. And I think that was actually the hardest part for me, because coming back out of the darkness, my mind was like, that was where the ego really came into hardcore gear. And it was like, it almost was like the ego was like, I can't believe you just made me effing do this. Like now now you're gonna gorge on all this unhealthy food and you're gonna fall back into old patterns of smoking weed. And like, it was like, I was like, whoa. And it was like, it had a big hold on me to the point where I was like, okay, I need to take just like a step back and like spend time just getting back into myself, because the integration was really hard. The ego came back really strong, stronger than ever. And I was like, okay, like that was the hard part.
Yeah. At what points do you feel like it started, or at what points in your retreat did you feel like it just stopped? The ego stopped coming at you, or it became completely silent?
Mm. The thing is, it I don't know if it ever completely became silent. I'll say it became silent in meditation, in the moments of meditation where I was spending the hours meditating. But then back in the waking aspect of walking around that dark room, it was there. It was like constantly thinking. It was like, oh, like what are you going to do with your business? Like who are you going to reach out to? And the thing is, it's almost like I came to really love it, because the ego is not something to be hated or continually pushed aside, because we can't operate in this world without it. We need it there to, because if it weren't there, then everything is one and everything is love. And then I'm going to run out in the middle of the street and be like, oh, I'm one with this car. It's like, no, you're not. You're going to get hit by this car. And so I think the difference is, it's not a matter of completely eradicating the ego, but it's a matter of how do we understand it on a deeper level, to see how it thinks, what its fears are. It's like a little kid. It just wants to be seen and it wants to be heard, and it doesn't want to be ignored. And once you're like, okay, I see you, I hear you, I love you, it's okay, what do you need? You can treat it in a way that's more measured, instead of necessarily following its impulses just out of, not necessarily being conscious about the impulses you're following.
Mm-hmm. And is there, so this setting was in Guatemala, right? Or where
Yeah.
was it exactly?
Yeah. Guatemala.
Is there any other like tribes or any places that you visited, like that that you've learned from different, spiritual principles or wisdom?
Yeah, that's actually my greatest passion. It's to travel the world and link the underlying thread that links all cultures and traditions, because we really are one. I genuinely feel and see it. And so I've had the blessed privilege of traveling to 50 countries across all 7 continents already in my life. And amazing teachers have been people like the Shipibo shamans in the Peruvian Amazon, who deliver ayahuasca ceremonies, to Maasai warriors in Kenya, who I've been able to spend time in one of their villages, to Tibetan monks up in the Himalayas in Tibet, in Lhasa, to India, and going to see, the Golden Temple and different beautiful spiritual sites in India. And what I've come to really understand is that regardless of where we actually are in this world, there's so many different ways of indigenous cultures, tribes that are all over the world in different ways, that have different belief systems, whether it's the Druids of Ireland or the Selknam of Tierra del Fuego in Argentina and Chile. All of these tribes people, they treat the world in a sacred way. They learn from nature first. They learn from animals second. They learn from humans third. And we often think that it's the other way around, that we are the top of the food chain, but we have so much to learn from just what's outside of us in the world in every way. And you really see that they don't take more from the earth than they actually need. They treat it with a tremendous amount of respect, because it is genuinely our mother, right? It's Mother Earth. And if we think about consciousness, well, the earth is actually far more conscious than we are. If you think about just a normal, mom and dad, for example, well, they're conscious and they're taking care of maybe a kid or 2 or 3 or 7. And the earth is providing life for billions of people, billions of animals, billions of plant life, which is all conscious as well. And it is providing the sustenance that it needs for those things to thrive. So the earth is far more conscious than we are. And I think where we've gone astray in our perception that we as humans are the top dog in the food chain is precisely that. And I think what I've learned really is that these tribes and these people, regardless of where they're from, treat the earth with a tremendous amount of respect and treat it as their teachers.
Yeah, in terms of like rituals or like initiations from each tribe, right? Like which ones stand out to you most?
Oh, that's a really good question. There's a book I recently read called The Way of Water and Spirit by a gentleman named Malidoma Somé. And he is from a tribe in Africa. And he explains his journey of initiation. And it is a mystical journey that you genuinely feel like, am I reading a story of someone who's on a psychedelic trip? But it genuinely wasn't. Like he was forced to stare at a tree for like 2 days straight, and then started to see the inner spirit of the tree, and then forced to go through a cave, and in the cave like came out on the other side. And there was a point where the elder tribes people were holding this cow skin, and they beat it with like a stick, and it opened a portal, and they asked each initiate to run into the portal, and like they gave them specific instructions, and like making sure that they come out. And he saw like 2 of his fellow initiates out of, I believe it was close to 40 or so, like come out and die basically. And so it's just like the story is fascinating. And I think there's so many stories like this as it pertains to indigenous cultures, and that's one of the things that just fascinates me. How, and one is also the Kogi tribe in the Sierra Nevada mountains of Colombia. They take their highest form of healers, known as mamas, when basically they're born, and they put them in a cave for the first 9 years of their life. And the point is similar to a darkness retreat, that you get to really see your soul, who you are. And I think that some of these practices are so typically traversed throughout history and culture, from the ancient Egyptians, the ancient Mayans, the Buddhists, that it really shows you, regardless of maybe the specific permutation that this specific area of the world is showing in their initiate culture or tradition, it has the same purpose, to sort of dissolve the ego into seeing yourself as something larger than that, something more connected to a universal source or light.
Yeah. So that's interesting that you say, like, I mean, with one of the initiations, she's staring at a tree, but and the overall point is that they have some kind of ability to see into the essence of things, and their connection to nature in a way. So you would say that there's principles, at least from what you've seen, that there's principles in nature that if you connect to it, it'll show itself, like, or there's different like underlying like hidden things within nature that if we learn how to access it, we can use it for the benefit of humanity, or to just for anything.
Spot on. And I think that oftentimes people sometimes think of spiritual or metaphysical or mystical concepts as something that's different or outside of the scientific or normal waking states. But even if you look around nature, for example, everything is created of geometric patterns. The way that waves wash up onto a shore is actually a sinusoidal pattern. The if you look under a microscope and see different parts of a leaf or even a snowflake, it's all geometrical. And if you play specific sound frequencies and put water on a plate, well, it will create different fractal patterns that are geometric in nature. Fibonacci sequence reflected, and Fibonacci's constant reflected in sort of how whales feed, how humpback whales feed in nature. And you can see sort of that like shell-shaped pattern that they create. And so it's like, well, everything is reflected in nature that we see, and nature doesn't hurry, yet everything is accomplished. And that's a quote by Lao Tzu, but it's so true. We're all so lost in the sauce in our own worlds, and just being like, I need to do this because this is going to get me to this job title or this amount of money. And this is the way it needs to be done, that we're so hyper focused and tunnel visioned on needing a certain outcome that we lose track of letting the aspects of surrender and flow come in to kind of take the lead, because life doesn't actually need it to be as hard as we make it. We have the opportunities to work hard and to create the things that we want, when they're divinely inspired, but it doesn't need to feel like we're pushing against a mass wall of resistance. And I think that's where the difference really comes in. And coming back to indigenous cultures, Native Americans have a practice where it's known as the peace pipe. And when you sort of light the peace pipe and you inhale through the peace pipe, that is the element of the feminine or the wisdom or the intuitive that is coming and being drawn down the pipe. And as it is inhaled in the medicine man's chest, that is the action of doing associated with the masculine, associated with the actual action of taking the smoke within the body. And so if you think about those two segments, how the feminine connects to the masculine, how first receiving the intuitive guidance and wisdom then is the catalyst to do the actual action. Well, you're no longer just doing for the sake of doing because someone on Instagram said you need to do this, or this is what it looks like to be a successful person in society, or this is the kind of house you need to have by this age and be married to this person. But you're actually listening to your own innate inner wisdom, receiving that guidance fully and completely, hence why meditation is key, and then acting upon that in a very conscious manner. And so it's this process of slowing down, which actually genuinely creates the mechanisms for change that most people want to see and feel in their lives.
Did any other people from the tribe ever, like, I don't know, challenge you in anything, or kind of said anything that challenged your own ego or anything like that?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think one of the really interesting things that actually has come up for me is an aspect of being in my body and moving. And what I mean by that is if you look at really any of these tribes, song circles, drum circles, dancing around a fire, really somatically being in the body is a huge part of the culture. And why is that? Well, because the body actually stores everything. The body is incredibly intelligent. It's the most automatic feedback system we have in our lives. It can tell you immediately if you ate something that agrees with you, or you ate something that's bad, or you feel good, or you feel bad. Like, it will tell you and you will know, but we often don't really listen to it the way we should. And what I think these tribes sort of do that pushed me out of my comfort zone at first, when I first started exploring, traveling through Africa. This is the one I'm really thinking about. The Maasai warriors, they jump and they dance and they really move their body. And I think at the time I visited, I was an investment banker. I was like a stiff white collar guy that was like, oh, I don't do this stuff. Like, that's weird. And I think what it allowed me to do is it gave me greater permission to be in my body and to move the body and to like really flow with it, to understand what it's trying to say, to integrate through movement. And I think that's so crucial. That's why people, if you think like people go to concerts, people love going out to nightclubs to dance. Like, well, why is that? We love to be in the body. And I think one of the things that for me personally challenged my ego was my need to be in the body. And so sort of since seeing them, move around in their body confidence the way they do, it gave me greater permission to be okay in my body.
That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, definitely being, in a setting like that, just being in a chair all day, definitely you kind of more up here thinking through things rather than just like being super present with your body.
Yeah. Totally.
And then I would say moving over a little bit to meditation now, like I found something very interesting in your PDF. And I believe the quote was around like you first start out observing your spiritual eye or like connecting with your spiritual eye. Is that correct?
Yeah. So some of the keys to meditation. Yeah. Well, I'll just simply say yes. If you have a follow up to that, I don't want to hijack that.
No, I mean, after that, I was just going to say, I don't even know what to say.
No, that's perfect. So then I'll just straight up riff on that. So that's actually crucial. Like, a lot of people I know approach me and they're like, I'm like, oh, meditation is crucial. Like, but like, do you do it? And they're like, oh, I'm so bad at meditating. I can't meditate. That is actually the first barrier to whatever you say is actually your reality. If that's what you think, that will be the result that you get, because you're basically pre-programming yourself to say, not going to happen. You don't meditate. You can't do it. It's half of it is actually belief. So, but once that barrier is there and you have a desire to learn to meditate, one is posture. So, sitting with your spine straight and erect so that the energy can flow up and down the spine across the cerebrospinal centers is number one. And then you close your eyes, and if you want to think about it in sort of a scientific way, you focus your eyes about 20 degrees above the line of horizon, not that it's strenuated or stressed at all. And then you close your eyes so that it's focused right at the point between the eyebrows. And so this is basically the third eye, right? And so what the third eye is the medulla oblongata, which is a point right in the back of the neck, is also in sort of spiritual culture, ancient yogic Indian tradition, also considered to be something called the mouth of God. And why they say that is because the life force energy of the body enters the medulla oblongata. And when you think about a baby actually in utero being born, the life, it starts with sort of the base of the spine and it begins to grow. And so the life force then goes into the spine and sits at the bottom of the coccygeal center, also known as the coiled gateway, which is why these nadis, these two sort of serpent-like cords that run along the spinal column, are what awaken the kundalini energy from the base of the spine and carry it upwards. Little bit of a sidetrack, but the medulla oblongata is where the life force enters the body. It is reflected through the pineal gland of the brain, and then that is what brings you to your third eye. But all of these energy centers or chakras are actually along the base of the spinal column, or along the spinal column. So that reflection is what you see as the third eye. And as you go deep into meditative states, and particularly this form of meditation I practice called Kriya Yoga, which is a form of pranayama, life force control using the breath, you begin to see it basically looks like a bright circle, like a lit up circle with a dot in the middle. That is like basically like, as you get more and more sharp in meditation, it should appear as a 5-pointed star. In the beginning, it really just appears as like a circle with a dot. And you're just like, that is when you go into that and you focus on that light, you feel a tremendous amount of peace wash over you. And that's the concept of the spiritual eye. And the whole point of the meditation practice that I learned and was brought up on is allowing yourself to go so deep into this state of body stillness and body like silence and relaxation that your consciousness can actually go through the spiritual eye, through the star in the spiritual eye, which is then this aspect of seeing yourself as one with everything, this feeling of nothing but simultaneously everything. And I was really able to experience that in the darkness retreat, where everything was sort of sensory deprived, more or less, and I was able to experience what it really means to be everything but simultaneously nothing. And so it's like, yeah, I can go into what that is like, but it's like, it feels like a surreal experience out of like the movie Interstellar, where you're like, you approach, it's like a vast area of nothingness, and there's like a single point of just like light. And then as you approach it, it's like you're coming closer, and then this light expands. And within that little point of nothingness that is just seemingly light, it contains everything. Every star, every universe, every planet, every galaxy, every person, every reality, every timeline of every reality that has ever been, will ever be, is ever existing in a singular point of nothingness, but simultaneously everything, which is like, it's genuinely confusing and unfathomable. And when I experienced it, I was like, whoa, like, it's like you're being like fed just like the universe, but beyond.
Is that what makes you quiet though? Like, I mean, you talk about like inner stillness or quiet. Is having or getting close to that point of nothingness is what makes your mind go quiet, or is it more of like, what do you think produces the inner stillness within somebody? Because there's definitely a difference, I think, from my own experience, like, not meditating, and then when I start to meditate, like, my mind's a little bit more quieter, a little bit more clearer. So
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it's so there's a Buddhist monk whose name is Chogyam Trungpa, and the way he explains it is meditation is how do you see just in between the spaces of overlapping thoughts? Because we're always thinking, and the mind is always busy, it's always moving, and it's not the purpose of the mind is to think. And so how do you just allow yourself to see just right between the spaces of those overlapping thoughts? And I think it's twofold. It comes with one, body stillness. So body stillness is actually the key. So when sitting down to meditate, I actually tense my body immensely, like tense every muscle head to toe for 6 seconds with an inhale, and then relax, exhale. I do that 3 times. And what that does is that rids some of the carbon dioxide from the body, which may create these excitations or feelings of twitching or needing to scratch or itch. And the whole point is like, how do you first bring your body into full and complete stillness? And then you start to focus on your breath and your breathing. And why does so many meditation practices, why do they talk about breathing? Well, spirituality, even if you think about the word spirituality, the Latin root of spirituality is spirare, which literally means to breathe. And so meditation, if your spirituality is he who can breathe, that who can breathe. And so breath is the connection, the cord that ties the soul to the body. And so when you start to then focus, single-mindedly focus on the breath and breathing, you begin to focus on this aspect of yourself that isn't starting to let the mind wander to all of these thoughts. If you can constantly pull it back to the breath. And then eventually, once you start to do that for like 10, 15 minutes consistently, you can start to rise above breath awareness. And when you rise above breath awareness, then is the point when you start to not think about the body breathing at all. And it's not like just normal involuntary breathing like right now. It's almost this feeling of genuinely feeling breathless. Like you're like, it feels like you have no conscious awareness of the body even breathing. Like the lungs aren't filling up or exhaling. And then you start to like genuinely feel like you are rising above yourself, above your plane of just like existence of consciousness.
Yeah, it's actually fun. My friends and I were talking about this the other day, but I mean, it's kind of similar to what you're saying, but we're talking about like lucid dreaming, and so like, so with that, you kind of have to have a sign to figure out whether it's a dream or not. So I think my sign, or for me, I'm just kind of naturally I can kind of just tell like, wait a minute, this is not or this is a dream right here. Whereas my friend, he's like, one thing that I do is I just, in the dream, I'll just pinch my nose and then take a breath in. And if I could breathe, then like, I know it's a dream. Because like, obviously if you do this right now, then like, if you do this right now, that you obviously it's kind of clogged. But if you do that in a dream, like I guess your soul or whatever, in that dream can kind of like realize like, oh shoot, like this is definitely a dream. So it's something about like, yeah, connecting to your soul like that. I mean, something about like your soul is definitely breathless, or I don't know.
Yeah, it's like the mechanism that animates the body. It's beyond, because I think if we it has to do with life force genuinely, and I think it even transcends breath. So breath is simply the cord that ties the soul to the body. But if you think about, if I took a cadaver in like a hospital like morgue and I filled its lungs with air, it's not going to suddenly come to life. There's something else that animates the body. It's like a force that, if you look again, talk about connecting cultures and traditions. In Chinese culture, it's called chi. In Japanese culture, it's called ki. In Indian culture, it's called prana. It's like this sense of life force that animates not just the human, but everything around us. And that comes back to me saying the earth is conscious, but also if we really want to get super meta, like even this glass of water is conscious. Like the glass itself is conscious because it's just fast moving, vibrating electrons and photons. And that in and of itself, if it's in constant vibration, well, it is a conscious being in and of itself. It is here to be a symbol for me as a receptacle that can hold water, that can hydrate me. And that is the symbol that my mind has created out of the iconography that this glass represents to me as a conscious being.
Yeah. And with angel numbers, for example, or I want to go into that. I think you said something very interesting. I'm trying to remember exactly what you said, but I think you quoted something along the lines of like when two numbers are put together or something, or numbers are put together, creates a certain vibration or sequence. Kind of what you were saying earlier too about yeah. But things being conscious, stuff like that. So can you explain a little bit more of that concept? I believe it comes somewhere different from a philosopher. If you
Yes.
can expand on that.
Yeah. So this is how I actually started communicating with what I now know to be angels. So in 2021, it was about 9 months or so after my mom passed on. I started to notice repeating numbers everywhere. And so I lived in New York at the time, and I worked in finance and investment banking at Goldman Sachs. And so my Bloomberg screen was always in front of my face, Excel spreadsheets, models, financial models, CNBC tickers of financial stocks running. And in New York, you also just walk out and you see license plates and building numbers, and just numbers are all in your face. Food receipts, GPS. And so I was like starting to pick up on repeating numbers, but it wasn't like I'm seeing numbers twice, 3 times, 4 times a day. I was seeing numbers, no exaggeration, 20, sometimes 30 numbers a day, 30 times a day. And I was like, my mind was like, there's something more that's happening here, that this isn't coincidental. Like, you've never noticed this in your life. This has never happened to you. Like, what's happening? So I started to research about numerology. And there's a Greek philosopher in the 600s BC. His name is Pythagoras. Many may know him from geometry class in middle school about the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, finding the hypotenuse of a long side of a triangle. Well, Pythagoras is also considered to be the father of numerology. And he said that every number in the universe carries an innate vibration. And when that number is either put into specific sequences or patterns, so in repeated patterns or alternating sequences or palindromes, those numbers are basically carrying messages like words. If you want to think about a number being a letter, and then number sequences basically kind of feeling like a word or a sentence or a profound message, that's one way to think about it. And as I started to learn about numerology on the intellectual level, I was like, okay, this is quite interesting. And then I started to do a little bit more research, and then also meditate on, why am I seeing all of these numbers everywhere? And I started to discover that people referred to them as angel numbers. And I was like, oh, angel numbers. Like, maybe I'm being communicated to by angels. That'd be pretty cool. And mind you, I have no religious upbringing. I have no history of angels or believing in angels or literally any of that. And so this was like, oh, okay, people call it angel numbers. Like, maybe angels are communicating with me. And that is how the aspect of being able to communicate with angels started to actually come through to me. It started as numerology that then transformed into me being able to genuinely receive messages in the form of visions or visuals, spoken words that come to me, and also felt senses.
And then, I mean, did any of these tribes believe in angels that you visited? I'm curious about that.
No, it's I never really learned about angels in my life from any of these tribes or people or anyone. Which is why I genuinely approached it from a standpoint of having no previous, like, what's the word, like either conceptions or judgments or prejudices about angels from either like a religious standpoint or connotation or anything like that. However, as I got into learning about angels, there's an amazing um, angel medium as well, angel guide. His name is Kyle Gray. He's based out of the UK. And I started to learn some of what he was teaching in his books and classes. And he says that every culture actually has their own aspect of what they call as angels. And so, for example, in Buddhist culture, bodhisattvas are basically considered their form of angels, these like eternal beings of light and unconditional love who are there to guide you and support you along your path. And even in Indian culture, or or obviously like sort of Anglo-American culture, angels are very topical, even all the way into sort of Islam. That they talk about angels as well. So it's even religions, cultures, traditions all around the world talk about some form of these high vibrational beings of unconditional light and love that typically appear as these flying beings with supernatural powers in some way, shape, or form. So you can understand angels on any level, and it truly feels quite scientific to me, because I view them as also my higher self, because I believe that there's a singularity of consciousness that becomes more and more fractalized. It has to do with the law of one. All is one, basically. And on some of the denser layers, you have humans, 8 billion of us, very dense, opaque beings. We're not translucent. We're not light-bodied. And there's a ton of us. We're a big fractal of this experience. But as you pull that back up into itself, into this singularity, well, you have higher densities, also known as faster frequencies of energy, much like our eyes can only see the visible spectrum of light, but there's all forms of the electromagnetic scale that we can't see. Radio waves, X-rays, UV rays, gamma rays, microwaves. They're there. We can't see it. Some animals can actually see the electric, basically electric current coming off of electric fences, while we can't see that. Well, similarly, there's all types of energy that we can't necessarily see, but just because we can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. And so it's to me the same thing. It's just a faster frequency of energy that is there. And that is genuinely what angels are to me. It doesn't necessarily need to be, this picture of a winged figure with a sword or whatever. It's literally like it's a fast moving energetic frequency that is unseen, but is benevolent in nature, that is here to help you. And so it's fascinating to me in that way.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think definitely people have maybe noticed a sequence here and there, like, I don't know, of random numbers that repeatedly show up. But why do you think it's numbers that they try to communicate with specifically? Like, why do you think it's why can't I just be why can't it just be words? Something straightforward.
The thing is that it can be, and for me it has become a lot of words, symbols. Angels will communicate to people in the way that they are most able to specifically receive them. So for some people it's visual, maybe it's rainbows or feathers on the ground, or literally there's like a specific sign that they have that's maybe a butterfly, or a specific type of bird. And so there's all these different, or even a sign that they specifically have that is like, oh, this is like a sign from that I'm on the right path. And they will respond to you in that visual cue. And for some people, that's numbers. Actually, for the majority of people, that's numbers. Well, why? Numbers are a language. Numbers percolate everything in our life. We look at the date, there's numbers. We look at the time, it's numbers. We look at the license plate, a house number, receipts. Numbers are literally everywhere. So it's actually, in our very fast moving day-to-day world, numbers are actually the path of least resistance that the angels can say, this person doesn't need to be super slowed down to notice it in order to take this sign in from me. Let me try to communicate through a number. That's why people are like, oh, 1111, make a wish. Well, that's something that is also ingrained in societal belief systems. However, angels have many different forms, right? So we talked about feathers, rainbows, things like that. But there's also auditory cues. Maybe there's you're a specifically auditory person and you listen to a lot of music, or a song comes up on shuffle that is almost exactly what you need to hear, or is exactly aligned with a message or something that you need to resolve in your life or connect with someone. For some people, it's maybe walking down the street of LA or New York and you overhear someone in Venice Beach or in Manhattan that is just happening to say something right as you pass by that you're like, wait, that's really weird. Like I was just thinking about that. Or wait, that's super weird. Like I was literally having a conversation about this, or that's something I need to do, or somewhere I need to go. And then for some other people, it might just be this innate sense of knowing. So some people are like, they'll think of a friend and then 5 minutes later, the friend will text them or give them a call and they'll be like, oh my God, I was just thinking about you. It's like, well, all of these ways are signs and synchronicities that we are being nudged by something higher or outside of ourselves that is there to guide us on a path or direct us to where we got to be. And so it relates to many people in different ways, but numbers super topical in everyone's lives, and that's one of the core ways they come through.
That's cool. That's cool. That's cool. Why is it or my question was flew out of my head. But okay, yeah. What does it look like to specifically answer to the call to these numbers, right? Like I think for a lot of people, they're like they see a number, they see it's repetitive, they don't know what it means, they don't know how to respond to it. So then how do you find the meaning behind the message, and how do you respond to whatever is being said?
Awesome question. I'm actually super glad you asked this question. So numbers are a language, and just like everyone has their own form of language, like slang, for example, or words that they say or abbreviations, the way you relate to any language is your own way. And I'll say that what helped me there was this blog that I would search this angel number. I'd be like, angel number 444. And Google would pop up. And there was this woman whose website I would read. Her name was Joanne Sacred Scribes. And I would read, like, she had like literally every single number, like even the most obscure, like 1532. Like there's like no significance, but to me, but it's like, it's an angel number. Then you can perceivably see every number as having a meaning. And so I started to read her website and be like, okay, what are like the basic formulaic blocks of like what each vibration means? And I came to sort of like decode a meaning, right? So 1 is a number of creation, 2 is a number of duality, 3 is the number of is a number along the lines of like there's also like archetypes, right? So 1 is the man, 2 is the woman, 3 is the child that comes forth, 4 is the 4 walls of the house. And so it's like 5 is the opportunity of change and looking beyond the horizon once the house is built. 6 is going over the hill and starting to see the community and finding other people that are a result of that. 7 is having this intuitive guidance and wisdom that comes to you. 8 is taking and sort of melding the material and spiritual to understand in what ways you're able to fully receive that. 9 is ending of cycles. 0 is this aspect of everything but nothingness and creation, godlike energy. So I started to like understand, and then meet numerologists, for example, basically to do like kind of study numerology in a way to kind of be like, okay, like what do these numbers mean? And then I would create my own language. And so what I mean by that is, as I notice these things, I'd be like, okay, 333. For me, that means a sign of spiritual support from the likes of the Ascended Masters. And so the Ascended Masters are these great spiritual beings who have come before us in their time. And I'd say, okay, 333, but there's also other aspects to pay attention to. What am I thinking as I see this number? Is it something that's fearful, or is it something that's sort of, I'm thinking about this new opportunity or person I need to reach out to? And so there's all these different permutations of what it can actually mean in your own world. So it becomes something that's quite sacred and special to you. While there are sort of templates to follow, just like any language, there's basic grammatical rules or basic structures of sentences. You can create a little bit of your own way of relating to that language, or your own tonality or slang or meaning behind it. So that is my sort of piece of advice to people who are maybe noticing some of these numbers or repeating patterns, that are wondering how they can start to work with them in a little bit more conscientious way, instead of just taking it as a face value.
All right, pause real quick. My camera battery died for some reason, and then I'm gonna plug it back in. But I have a follow-up question.
Sure.
So continuing on, I mean, I get the felt sense. I don't know if this is true or not, but I mean, do you see so whenever you see somebody, maybe you're walking out in public, right? Do you ever see like numbers on people? Like you see somebody, you're like 51, or like, does that ever happen to you? I get a felt sense that does.
It's interesting. I don't think it's necessarily numbers so much for me, but I can almost immediately pick up on what people are kind of going through in their lives on like an emotional state level and what it may pertain to. And at times it's more amplified than other times. I like I can it's like, it feels like I can see into people, low key. It's like a mix of like empath energy, but also like, I think just like when you really meditate a lot and you're kind of connected into a higher form of consciousness, or higher dimensions of consciousness rather, you can see through things. Like you can see through realities or structures, or like we are the thought that is thinking itself into creation, right? So even if you think about human consciousness as it evolves into higher densities, you have a higher density known as the sixth density from a channeled source called the raw contact, teaching the law of one, which is the sixth density is where social memory complexes live. And that is because we are in the third density, and that is the density of animate beings with conscious awareness of existence, reaching for a higher purpose. Fourth density is the density of love. Fifth density is the density of wisdom. Sixth density is the density of love, light, or love, wisdom together. So what that means is, because everything is already unified in love, and then you add on fifth density aspects, which is everything being known. So capital K, known, wisdom being readily available, right? Together, love, wisdom together means that unity of wisdom of all beings. So that means in this sixth density, it is a social memory complex where every thought within every being of the social memory complex is known amongst each other and itself, because it is all only loving thoughts, and it is all capital K wisdom that is known by all. So it's like this aspect of, even as I think what meditation does is it lifts and raises your consciousness and your vibration to something that is higher, to the point where you can like people like, I joke with people, but not really joke. One of the things I want to do in my life is develop the skill of telepathy, to basically communicate with people without words, just like completely look at someone, and the exact thought is received. And I know it's something that's possible. There's an awesome book called The Field by Lynn McTaggart, and she is literally goes through every scientific study as it pertains to consciousness research, like dating back to the 18 and 1900s, about like people literally running studies from like psychic awareness to remote viewing in the academic world. And so I think like that telepathy, or basically like knowing what someone's thinking or feeling, is it's definitely possible if you believe it is.
Yeah, definitely. When you talked about density, that whole concept and stuff, I kind of there's something that I intuit. I kind of say put it in words, but you kind of described it a little bit. I mean, kind of going back to earlier point about like singularity, that everything comes from one point. So everything is encapsulated in this. And so when you kind of, at least for me, the way that I view it is like when you kind of come into yourself at one point, like you've focused on yourself and bring yourself together like this, then like you almost start to have access to these different layers and levels of density that you kind of said. So like love and all these kind of things. And then I wouldn't know how to continue describing it from there, but
no, you're right. And the basic structure, even everything follows this torus field. It's like a toroidal field that looks like this. It's like the energy of that moves around our body, but simultaneously how consciousness also evolves, and how universes sort of have galaxies that flow in and out through them, through black holes. It's everything feels like it's very scientific. Like the more I do research around consciousness and scientific study and astronomy, space, like everything feels like it has overlapping aspects to it. But the level of, I think, where was I even trying to go with this? I honestly completely forget.
Yeah, no worries.
There was something I wanted to mention around sort of like how consciousness evolves, or how it can evolve. Oh, sorry. Yeah, this is what it was. It's kind of never ending, and it goes in octaves. So you sort of like evolve in densities, but then each octave starts again from the first density, but at a higher rate. So it's almost like a musical scale of sorts. And I also think about Stephen Hawking's globe theory, where he's like, he talks about a globe and how many globes can you fit inside of that globe? And then how many globes can you fit inside of those globes? And it goes deeper and deeper till it's literally infinite. It can be infinitesimally small.
I mean, going back to also telepathy you're talking about too. I mean, I'm someone that think that's possible as well. I think it's actually kind of straightforward, at least when I try to practice it. You just literally just put a thought out there. And I think the person has to be somewhat, I mean, from my experience, the person has to be somewhat alert or attentive to what's going on inside of themselves. So I think like if I go out in public, for example, right, and then like I think something towards somebody, if they're alert and they're awake, then they'll be like, oh shoot, this guy thinking about me, or this guy looking at me, or et cetera, et cetera. If they're asleep or they're kind of in their own head, or their ego's kind of like, they're thinking about, oh, I got to go pick up the kids, this and that. And it'll just kind of, I guess, fly over them, or just like, or maybe there's angels that are protecting them from different harms, or maybe they're not just receptive enough. But I find that there's people that are receptive. And then once you like kind of start to think things, you have that connection with them. But I think it can definitely be developed. Like you meet a stranger and then, connection can open up, and then everything can just be telepathic. You just know this person. But that's kind of what I've seen so far.
I love that. Absolutely. I mean, like, even as you talk, like I get all these romanticized views of like what is possible with just being able to connect with people on that level of just non-verbal communication, and if we take a step back and talk about language, for example, it is one of the highest forms of communication we have in this human vessel as it currently stands at this time. But it is such a limited form of conveying everything that we want to convey. Like even if we think about feelings are much older than words, because words had to have evolved from felt senses. But even then, words can't even do justice to what is possible in terms of what is able to be experienced as a dimension of consciousness, which is just, even to me, a wild thought. And to your point, I think for what is relevant to people, and there people are probably like, okay, this is super metaphysical and out there. How do I ground this back into something related to me? If you stare at someone long enough on like a subway or out at a restaurant or somewhere, that person like will probably look back, and because they'll have that sense that someone is looking at them. Or even if someone is looking at you and you're out and you're just like, you just like are on a train and you're like on your phone and you happen to like look up and someone's staring at you, and then you like make that awkward eye contact with someone for a few seconds and then they look away. It's like, well, someone knows, like, it's a directed form of energy. It's how you're basically directing your intention. And I think your eyes are a way to do that. Your eyes are, how do you direct intention with your eyes to look at something? That's your energy. So yeah, it's all energy. It all comes back to that.
Yeah. Is there anything else that comes to your mind? Kind of went off the topic of angel numbers, but is there anything else that, comes to your mind when it comes to angel numbers? Like, is there anything else that fascinates you, about that whole subject?
Let me see. I think what fascinates me is that it is a stepping stone. It's a stepping stone to being able to communicate through words. Because then what happened from the angel numbers is I started to ask for specific signs and get it in written word, like billboards and storefronts, or side of windows in Manhattan, or chalk written on the ground when I went for a run. And then I started to basically go into meditation and be like, okay, can I receive like messages in meditation from these angels? And then over the course of like a handful of weeks to a month or so practicing that, it started to strengthen. And I was like, okay. At first I was like, am I going crazy? Am I just making this up? But in the beginning, because your intuition is not sharpened like a tool or like an antenna, you're not in the right frequency, it may feel like you're making it up, but you have to just continually practice. You cannot give up practicing. So the thing that is amazing to me, that I hope inspires other people, is that it doesn't stop at angel numbers. It's an amazing thing, but it can also completely evolve into full on dialogue of guidance, to the point where now I genuinely feel if I have a question of a decision I need to make, and I mean, we all need to make hundreds of decisions a day, to the point where I will literally ask, like, okay, do I make this decision or not? Or do I make this decision? I'll hear a voice in my body and also feel it in my body. So I think what I want to just convey as it relates to angel numbers is you don't need to stop there. Angel numbers are simply a symbol that can evolve as you evolve, if you want it to evolve into something that will strengthen your intuition, your own level of self-trust, and your inner guidance system. So yeah, that's like the biggest thing.
I love that. So it's like it's the whole internal guidance system, seeing these numbers and like learning how to like use it as a guidance system to navigate through different life situations. Super cool.
Hondo P.
And then a couple more questions before we end this. But actually, can you touch on how, you know, when people, they get the like, oh, am I making this up, or is this you know, is this real? Or because that's definitely something that happens a lot, especially on the spiritual path. You'll get downloads or information, or maybe you'll get like strong imaginations, and then you're like, nah, my mind's just like making stuff up. Or when you see these numbers, you're like, my mind's making this stuff up. So can you touch a little bit more on that? Like maybe why does our mind do that? Or
yeah, absolutely. I'll say that your ability to discern if something is egoic chatter versus true intuitive guidance is, in my experience, directly linked to your level of calming the mind, most likely, most importantly, in my perception, through meditation. That is the mechanism how you really bring the egoic mind into stillness, into silence, to allow yourself to feel deep inner peace and calm. Some people believe that as consciousness evolves, you also simultaneously have less thoughts a day. The brain thinks less. It feels less active. It's almost like that feeling of a sense of nervousness. So think about it like a twitch, like shaking your leg or biting your nails. Like those kinds of things fall away because you don't feel like you need to preoccupy the mind or the body. So similarly, thoughts fall away. And so as those thoughts start to fall away and you become more placid in your state of mind, and you attain a level of emotional mastery as you go about your day and the situations you encounter. Like, if something happens that is not in alignment with one of the things you may have wished, which expectations are a whole nother conversation to be had, but like, how do you respond to situations outside of your control that happen? Do you get really excitable? Like that totally used to be me. Or if you practice calming the mind through meditation and stilling yourself, you will start to feel a level of emotional mastery. And that will then trickle over into saying, okay, this impulsive thought or download or guidance came into me. Am I making this up? Is this the egoic me, or is this actually like real, true, intuitive guidance? And I'll say that it is directly correlated to your ability to meditate and quiet yourself, to then discern in your heart. Like, you'll feel it. We talk about felt senses and experiences being the true gauge of what is consciousness. You'll be able to then fully feel it in your body. Because like, if I tell you ice cream is sweet, but you've never had ice cream, you're never going to know how amazing ice cream is. You'll just be like, oh, this guy said it's sweet. Like, you'll probably think it's like tastes like a date or something. It's like, no, this is ice cream. And then you'll be like, oh, okay, ice cream. This is sweet. I've experienced it. I felt it in my mouth. So it's the same concept. The more you practice it, you have to actually first feel it to experience it. And that is almost most easily and readily done through meditation. Yes, there are other mechanisms, breathwork, plant medicines, what else? Maybe like tantric practices, something like that. There's many mechanisms by which consciousness can experience itself in the higher cerebrospinal centers. But I think meditation is absolutely crucial for anyone who really wants to develop that sense of waking intuitive. Is this intuition or is this ego?
yeah. And then I think a good way to end it is maybe you can leave someone with a message, or yes, leave someone with a message before this episode comes out.
Yeah, let's do it. So, I don't know, man, call it intuition, but I had a feeling you're going to ask me something like this, and I brought my angels cards right next to me on my desk. Usually they don't sit here. Usually, part of me was like, I need to pull these cards over here and just keep them next to me. Who knows?
Nice.
So,
Step ahead.
exactly. So I'll actually just pull a card for the collective and something that people need to know, right? So the way I do this is I say a brief angel blessing. So angels and energetic beings of love and light, thank you for revealing to all of us, to the collective, what we need to know, all of those watching Ezekiel's show, what is in their highest good and wisdom and the highest good of all, a message that is relevant and coherent for all people of the earth and the planet that need to hear this. So we say, and so it is. Taisha into Doe, Taisha into Doe, Taisha into Doe, spoken as it is stated, and so it is done. Thank you. So with that, this is what I'll say to the people watching. This is what your angels want you to know. Those listening to this show right now, you are on a profound journey of your own spiritual growth. You are expanding yourself by listening to something that may not be something you might have normally heard or experienced elsewhere. This is part of your own step evolution in experiencing yourself in the highest form of consciousness that you can be. You listening to this show in this episode right now is by no coincidence and no chance. You are guided to this show energetically for some reason. Every decision you have made in your life is in some way conspired to lead you to this exact moment, even listening to this exact card pull and reading that you are hearing. Know that you are exactly where you need to be. Your level of spiritual growth is going to expand profoundly. You being here is a profound message and energetic signal that you are sending out into the world. That is a beacon of hope for not just yourself, but all of those in your close circle and sphere, and simultaneously the ripple effects that you're about to create in this world. Continue on your spiritual path, continue on your journey. You will experience profound spiritual growth in every way, and allow yourself to receive that love.
It's awesome. There's definitely a resonance there, so I agree. Or amen.
Amen. Aho.
All right.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, where can people find you?
Of course, people can find me on my website, nealbakshi.com, and also Instagram at neal.bakshi. And those are sort of the best two ways to reach out and contact me. I love to hear from everyone. And honestly, just hearing about people's journeys, seeing how I can help people or provide support any way I can is my passion. So feel free to reach out. I'm always here.
Cool. Well, I got to say thank you for coming on as well. And have a good rest of your day.
You too. Thank you. Thank you.